Hello, welcome to Stories in Time. My name is Eloise Schottler. I'm your storyteller. In 1985, I went to Nairobi, Kenya for the UN Conference on Women. It was exciting. We had a project, and once we got there, we realized, my friend Cynthia and I, that we hadn't paid attention to the other great attraction in Kenya, the animals. So we quickly made arrangements for a weekend safari to Amboseli Park. I hadn't really paid any attention to that. I'd been so wrapped up in the project. You know how that happens. And as we got into the Land Rover that morning, they picked us up at our hotel, and we started out and left the environs of Nairobi City behind us and entered into the distant plains, riding through the flat, going further and further away toward, would you believe it, Mount Kilimanjaro. Amboseli Park is right at the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania. We arrived about noontime, just in time for lunch, and Cynthia and I were shown to our room, which turned out to be a round hut with a bathroom. 2 beds draped in mosquito. We were warned as we walked out there with the man that was carrying our bags. Don't go to the fence, madams. There are lions and other wild beasts out there. Be sure that you stay on the sidewalk, the cement sidewalk, because there's snakes. And often be very careful in the bathrooms because they're poisonous spiders. I can tell you this set me back a bit. But we went in, the room was charming, exotic. We got stuff put away, and we were ready to go out for our first drive. Our driver, Francis, picked us up. It was the same group that had come out together from Nairobi. A couple of women from Japan, Cynthia and I from the US, and there was 2 other women, and I don't remember where they were from. And we started down a long and dusty road, and all of a sudden there ahead of us on either side of the road in a flat plain were animals. Are those zebras? I'm not very knowledgeable about animals. Are those zebras? No, madam, wildebeest. He was totally uninterested in the wildebeest, and I must say that there were quite a number of them. They seemed to be everywhere. I was snapping pictures as fast as I can, but they were of so little interest to our driver that he didn't even slow down. He stopped a little bit up the road, spoke to another driver, and then he went on and made a turn, and he pulled off the road, and we found ourselves going through a grassy area until we joined a herd of our own. A herd of mechanized vehicles, other Land Rovers that were gathered because up ahead, walking across the flat green, was a crowd of elephants, small and large, a herd of elephants, and we were so close. Once again, I stuck my head up out of the open hatch, the top of the Land Rover, and shot pictures as fast as I could until he pulled off. And that's how it continued all afternoon. The sight that I remember most from that afternoon was as the sun was beginning to set. The light was changing, and ahead of us, a giraffe ran across the road and off into the distance, free and able to go where and when and how he wanted to. It was a beautiful sight. Back at the lodge, we had dinner in a room with all these mostly women from the conference, and the languages and the voices just, they just fill the air in waves of conversation. probably as we were doing at our table, about what they had seen for the afternoon. And after supper, as it began to get dark, we went out to a stone pavilion outside. It had a roof, some seats inside, and in the center was a fire pit. And there was a fire burning, a golden fire, because it had turned cold. If you walked to the edge of that pavilion and looked up, the stars were sparkling like diamonds in a black sky. It looked like someone had taken a handful of Cool Whip and smeared it across the sky because they wanted a Milky Way. I slept well that night. I woke up early ahead of my friend, and I lay there on my bed, which was nearer to the door, to the window. And I looked out, and in that round clearing outside, there were just some trees. And in the trees were large black birds perched on the limbs. It was my birthday, the first day of my 50th year. And as I looked at those birds and I saw myself laying in this bed covered with mosquito netting, and I thought once again, as I had since the 10 days that I had been here in Africa, why am I so far from home? Chevy Chase, Maryland seemed so far away, especially on my birthday. Well, we got up, had breakfast, and we were right there at the Land Rover to get started again. And it was a bright and sunny day, a wonderful day. Francis started off, and he was going in a little different direction, and we saw wildebeest, and we did see herds of zebras and all the other animals, but he stopped on the road and he chatted with another driver. And then he turned and he looked at all of us and he says, Madams, we shall see lions." He drove on for a little bit. I had taken out my telephoto lens and attached it to the camera. And then he drove off the road not too far. There was a stand of bushes, and at the base of those bushes was a family of lions. The male lion, the mama, and 2 cubs. They were dozing in the hot sun. They were no more than 20 feet away. "Be quiet, madams. This is dangerous." I aimed my telephoto lens directly at the lion with his beautiful mane, and just as I got ready to snap the picture, he reared his head up and he looked toward me, and it felt to me as though our eyes met through that telephoto lens. It was electrifying. We stayed for a few more minutes, and then they became more restless, and the Papa Lion looked like he was going to stand up. And at that, Francis turned on the ignition and backed away. "We should go now, madams." We rode on until he came to about a 200-foot hill. And on the top of that hill was an observation tower. It was wood, looked just like a shack, stood up on legs, nothing underneath, just stood up on legs, and there was like a little tree house at the top with big openings on all 4 sides so that you could see in all directions. "Go up. I'll wait here. You go up and look. Look, madams." Well, Cynthia and I walked up to the hill, and then we climbed up the ladder into the little room. And we were standing side by side looking out the front opening, a large opening. And it was amazing. We looked out, and to the right, it was green. It looked moist. And there was just, there were elephants, trunk to tail, slowly plodding across this green expanse. Old, middle-sized, and young, and teeny tiny too, holding on to maybe a mama's tail. And then I swung my head the other direction toward the left, and it was like a canvas that had just been divided in two. Over here was the moist-looking green grasses and the elephants, and on the other side of the split, it was golden, grasses growing tall, dry, and I saw no animals in those grasses. There were no wires. The sky was big and huge. It seemed endless. The sky was just endless blue. Suddenly, with no warning, it was as though someone had turned a spigot inside my head, and water began to pour out of my eyes, just coursing down my cheeks. I could feel the cool tears running down and even dripping off. Well, I brushed them off as quick as I could and rubbed my eyes, and I wanted this to stop. This was embarrassing. People would see that I was crying. But you see, I wasn't crying. I was weeping. And I couldn't stop it. I couldn't make it stop. So I went down to the flat, and it wouldn't stop. I got back into the Land Rover. And Frances saw me when I got in, and I sat at the back. And finally, it began to clear, and I stopped crying, but not before it occurred to me that it would be all right if I died now. Oh, that was a bad thought. I shook it away. And then finally the tears stopped, and I looked at Frances and I said, "How long have you been coming up here, Frances?" 30 years, madam. Do you ever get tired of coming? Oh, no, never. And I understood that he knew what had happened to me and my weeping experience. I had seen a genesis right before me, as though I was at the beginning of time. Well, everybody came back, and we headed back into Nairobi. And it didn't take long before we could see the city rising up ahead of us. The modern city that sat there in the plains. We were coming back to civilization. You know something? I wasn't sure I was ready. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. I hope you'll come back. A new story every week.